This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Liner Notes. Learn from the hundreds of musicians and industry pros I've spoken with for The Unstarving Musician on topics such as marketing, songwriting, touring, sync licensing, and much more. Sign up for Liner Notes. Liner Notes is an email newsletter from yours truly in which I share some of the best knowledge gems garnered from the many conversations featured on The Unstarving Musician. You'll also be privy to the latest podcast episodes and Liner Notes subscriber exclusives. Sign up at unstarvingmusician.com. It's free and you can unsubscribe at any time. This is The Unstarving Musician. I'm Rabanzo. This is my podcast. It features conversations with independent music artists and industry professionals with occasional special topic episodes featuring yours truly. A glimpse into the minds of my varied guests, all intended to help independent music artists better understand the marketing, business, and creative processes that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. Welcome to another episode. It is a pleasure to be in your ears today. As always, what are you doing and what are you wearing? The holidays are almost upon us. Speaking of which, I have a couple of holiday things for you of possible interest. The Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs has been discounted for the holidays. You can now pick it up on paperback and Kindle for only $4.99 on Amazon. Or you can just go to unstarvingmusician.com/book to both learn about the book and buy it from Amazon. And then we have a new shop and a new item in the new shop. More drinkware. You can find that cool can-shaped glass with the Unstarving Musician logo on it at our online store, unstarvingmusician.com/shop. In case you're in the buying mood for yourself or for friends or loved ones. And then outside of that, I have started dripping out videos from my performance with Johnny Bergen and Jorge Resendiz in the Undercover Blues performance at Moser Cafe Culture here in Querétaro. It's a really cool show. I did a little tiny bit of mixing to make it sound a little nicer, and the video looks great. I hope you will enjoy them. I'll put a link in the show notes to my artist YouTube channel, which is actually just at Rabanzo on youtube.com. LA-based producer Lars Deutsch is my guest, and he just released a whimsical album called Boum Dans L'Espace. Boum Dans L'Espace, pardon my French. He also created a series of short videos for the project, which was all inspired by his appreciation for early sci-fi and the slightly out of tune. Lars is a 2-time Emmy winner whose bio reads in part like this. He went from heavy metal guitarist to singer to songwriter to a master's in classical composition, to international performances of his classical works, to lecturing in composition and audio production, to scoring 300 films and commercials that have collected over 100 awards. That's pretty impressive in my book. Lars's commercial work has been featured on everything from Toyota ads to Stephen King's The Passenger. So he definitely knows what he's doing. He does some really nice work. You can also hear about his work and working with him in episode 216 featuring singer-songwriter Amiena, and also Lars had a prior appearance here on the podcast in episode 204. I will put links to both of those in the show notes for you. In this conversation, we talk about his new release, his hobby for collecting sounds, his inspiration for this retro sci-fi gem he just released, the charm of the slightly out of tune, his new videos, the storytelling effect of weirdness and humor, using socials for fun rather than promotion, thoughts on AI and music, artist development, Dolby Atmos, and thinking less from a biohacking perspective. All right, please enjoy this conversation with me and Lars Deutsch. So we survived the pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I am. California decided to have a much longer pandemic than most places. So, but still, yes, we did. And I mean, I was kind of lucky because I had like some of the bigger projects that happened. So I'm very fortunate with that. but it's also kind of weird because I'm a part of what this podcast is about and like working with artists. That of course was very difficult during that time, and it just seems that things are getting back to like, because people need some money from touring and other things need to be happening. So it just seems to like the writing sessions and all of these things just seem to be getting back to normal.
Yeah. It is interesting that I still see things that are like, oh, right, that's how it used to be before the pandemic, because they're just like you say, things are just are still some things still getting back to normal. And I was right there with you. We in Panama, so we live in Querétaro, Mexico now since April of last year,
Yeah.
and in Panama, the day we left in was it March 31st? They had just lifted the mask mandate that day, and then we got here and they still had one in place, but it was very loosely. Wasn't
Yeah.
really enforced, but yeah, it was. We were sort of living the slow uh, exit as well.
Yeah, and I mean my thing with this is that I come from a science town,
Hmm.
and so literally one of my best friends was in the German COVID task force and lots of medical researchers, and they all said basically around 2 years ago, around Christmas with Omicron, and once they had solid data about Omicron, they were like, okay, great, this is over, back to normal, life can continue. And one of them, who's a very political guy, said, well, let's see for how long the fear is useful. I predict like at least a year. And I'm like, oh, shut up. And then, of course, living in California, it was useful for another year.
Crazy.
So yeah, I don't know, but I'm glad to see. Like, I mean, tonight I have three different things I could go to in LA, and I mean, for 99% of the people, the they're just relaxed, and it's nice to see like the music peeps and the events and the concerts and everything, and yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah, yeah. Let's see. I was looking at some notes from the last time we spoke, and that was in mid 2021, and I was listening to we got to the a bit about Amiena and that you guys had kind of holed up together to work on her music at the time, and it was just you were like in quarantine and all that stuff. But anyway, I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah, glad it's done. So you have this whimsical, at least whimsical to me, release out the that you call a retro sci-fi album, and you have to pronounce the title for me because I'm not capable.
Yeah, it's also, as I don't really speak French, it's Boum Dans L'Espace, but I should really have some French person pronounce that properly for people.
Maybe the YouTube will pronounce it. They have a pretty good pronunciation thing
Yeah.
there. Well, it's cool. It looks cool in writing, and so it just came out last month, October. Yes.
Yes, came out October 13th, and it was a little bit of a like the title change was one of the later things because I was playing around with naming the Space 46, and apart from the fact that there is already two, three things with Space 46, the other problem was that Space 46 kind of sounded cold. And one of the things that, and I always, when people talk to me about the album or something, I can always see if they actually did listen or not, because this is very warm and very humane. And it's kind of very sweet and all of this. It has this retro sci-fi thing, but it's very kind of human centric. So the Space 46 sounded a little too cold, and the Boum Dans L'Espace is kind of is sweeter. And also there's a little there was a French film called La Boum with Sophie Marceau, two parts when I was growing up. That was a big deal, and it's if you watch it now, it's super retro cute. You wouldn't make a movie like this anymore. And so boom can mean like, the Big Bang in space, but it can also be in kind of like party and with this cute film. So there were a couple of levels to this where this title made more sense.
And when you talk about the human aspect, that the warmth, is that mostly sonically or part sonically and part visually because you have all these videos as well?
I mean the some of the videos are kind of cute and silly, and I mean even if you don't enjoy the music, the Instagram for the album is kind of fun. Um, but it is sonically mainly because I mean one of the things that so I write a lot for film and TV and for artists, and one of the things I do is I'm a pen and paper composer, so I try to get every note right, but a very, very important part of the communication is the sounds you pick. And so I spent hours and hours building sounds, clicking through sounds, playing sounds, and be it for a film when you have a certain visual and you just need the sound that really works, or you have a voice for a singer and you need that specific sound. And so in a way, it's not very effective because I go through like hundreds and hundreds of sounds and then I find the one that works. So what I started doing at some point is whenever I play with something and I improvise with the sounds, presets or stuff I built myself that triggers something where I'm like, oh, this is cool, this sounds like this, or it's unique, I started to collect them. And so what I found for myself is that I really gravitate to these big analog thick synthesizer sounds, but I also found that I'm playing them very often like big dramatic strings. And so it's other friends of mine did sci-fi albums, and you have like they have mechanical spaceship stuff on the cover, and it's in a way it's cold, but what this is there's always kind of like a little bit of a human story in this, and there's always a little bit of warmth and kind of round edges and melodies and things that are more storytelling, more human-centric than, I don't know, sci-fi sometimes is.
Right. You're making me think of this somewhat new release of old stuff by Pete Townsend and The Who, that Lifehouse. Are you familiar with it? And if so, do those sounds appeal to you? I'm kind of trying to wrap my head around what you described as these analog keyboard sounds that appeal to you.
So I'm not aware of that project. The way I work, because I think like a creative that is producing something in 5 seconds. So a lot of times the way I go through sounds and play with sounds is just very, very selfish and directional, where it's, oh, this works, moving on, taking this. And so while this is a little bit of a throwback and I'm building in, especially in terms of sound, of course, on other people's creations as well, it's really very much me in the moment with just an image in my mind. And so I didn't try to hit any specific existing thing in the past. The only thing that I did that was kind of more bigger picture strategic was when I got closer to 12 songs, I noticed that I had a couple of songs that sounded more 80s that I would like them to sound. Mm-hmm. And then I did all kinds of things to dial them in to sound more vintage. And that's kind of like the most strategic thing. But it always was kind of like this project that I had in my mind, and I was just following my own ideas. There's not really a reference in any shape or form on this one. And that's also that was part of the appeal to me, because one of the reasons why I decided to go all in and do this was I worked on 2 bigger score projects in 22 and late 21 through 22, and wrapping it up in early 23. And it's projects that have, just by the nature of them, lots and lots and lots of notes. And so there's lots of music that gets changed, rewritten, and I wanted to do something where I could just follow a story idea without any notes or without a client. And so this is kind of very me in a way.
Articulate for me, if you could, the inspiration for compiling a collection like this that is so retro sci-fi.
So weird. Yeah. I got a wonderful email from a music library in London where the guy said, "Oh my goodness, I love this so much. Why the hell did you make this?" So I think it was, I try to plan less and try to be kind of just like listen more, be more observant. And one of the things when you write as much as I do for pitches, for all kinds of things, you compile a lot of material. And one track that I had, which is the first track on the album, which is called Nikolai in Space, was long time ago. I met somebody who works kind of in a group where they own a lot of Nikola Tesla IPs, including books. They have screenplays and all of these things, and they were doing presentations, and we were talking about music and how can you capture the mood of what they're doing, capture Nikola Tesla a little bit. And so basically when they do a presentation, so it doesn't sound, or when they send people videos, so it doesn't sound so cold, and how do you capture the essence? So I spent some time, and there's a video where you can see using numerology and turning his name into a melody, and basically gave that to them to use for that. And it's very steampunky, weird, with like slightly out of tune upright piano, and I really enjoyed working in that style. And this they've used this for a while, and then I don't know, you know how it is with like entertainment projects, then things don't go anywhere. So I have this track lying around, so I started playing and developing with this, and using all kinds of analog emulation, and I really enjoyed the sound. And then out of this track, I was thinking, you know what, I have the synthesizer patch that I found with the last time, like, let me just play with these chords. And it organically grew more and more into this cute world where it is a little bit retro sci-fi and a little bit emotional and a little bit, just sounding like it's been made in the 70s at times. And I had a wonderful another email where somebody who's really into synthesizers and everything got really offended when he told me like, oh, you must have done this with this and that synthesizer, and I have one of those at home, and I'm like, I don't even know that synthesizer. And, but it's kind of following a visual, narrative in my mind that just seemed appealing, and then things grew out of this, and one song grew out of the next. And I also sometimes tend to do things that are kind of complicated, lots of chord changes, and I wanted to have a couple of things that are just almost naive and sweet, that you can just, that they are simple and enjoyable and clear structures, and just this whole genre lent itself. And then I don't know, that the album dictated itself would have been the succinct answer.
Were you a? I'm guessing the answer is yes, but were you a sci-fi kid? And if so, what are your like favorite things to
So
think
not
about?
super consciously, but one thing that I guess that I just realized while working on this is I had this book at home, and it was the sci-fi classics from the 50s. And I remember like going through that and looking at like the the weird alien masks and some of the classics. And so then of course everybody, every kid loves the Godzilla movies and stuff. So I was a little into it, but this kind of came a little later. And like the for people who have seen Ed Wood, there is a joy in the, if you can still see the string on the spaceship.
Yeah.
And I actually went to a model store here to see if I can buy a spaceship on a string. I was not convinced yet, but maybe the second batch of videos will be more ridiculous, even more ridiculous.
Well, you can certainly craft one. Just buy whatever spaceship and do the string thing. I forgot about that movie Ed Wood. It's I really enjoyed it. It's been a while since I've seen it, but
I think also one thing that kind of motivated me working on this was one, this kind of human thing, and then there's a lot of talk and a lot of automated and inhumane stuff, and a lot of music that is over, like, when the vocals are overtuned and all of this. And I kind of like the idea of having something that is in a way very technological, theoretically forward facing, but it being so cute and imperfect. So I mean, every second track that I have on this album is out of tune in some way or the other. and that's on purpose. So I sit there and make it out of tune. And there is something, I think the retro sweetness, there is something to that. And I was recently I for a rap production, somebody sent me a lot of hip hop to listen to, and it was so incredibly tuned and polished, and no real instrument had like involved, and it seemed so cold. And so I like this idea of being this super humane. And if you look at this old sci-fi stuff, and also because of the technical limitations, it sometimes it's really funny. I mean, and really enjoyable to watch. Yeah. So that's kind of like that's I did the musical version of that.
You know, I never thought of that, what you're saying about like when you were using the example of the track that was sent to you to preview, to listen to, and that it was so, everything was so perfectly tuned. It was kind of cold, but I, I don't listen to music with the same ear, obviously, because we're just, you know, our backgrounds, but I think that's probably an issue for my ears and a lot of music that I'm like, I don't know, it just sounds like A, I don't, it's not really my thing, and or B, it sounds way too perfect.
Yeah, it's also the human aspect comes in taking the time, and that's one of the things where you have like every music producer has a synthesizer where you press a key and some kind of arpeggio or something starts that in itself is loud, bright, and impressive, and that plays with our mind. Like this, high frequency is nutrition for the nervous system, is what like some audiologists quote. And so the problem sometimes is that people don't want to spend the time on doing music, right? And they don't want to live with the, I don't know, with the actual humane aspect of it. And I mixed an album last year around this time that charted in Germany as the album, and the single charted in the college radio. And they bow their guitars, and there's a lot of stuff that is done in a very punky attitude, and because of that, it lives and breathes. If these slightly, like, you can't be too out of tune because there's a sweet spot. But when I played this album that I mixed to people, I could see how many people really responded to this. And part of this was also they recorded the guitars in 444, so 4 hertz higher than we usually do music production. But they also had synths on that they hadn't tuned. They kind of didn't think about it while they were recording. So some of the stuff I tuned together, but some of the stuff also, especially when the ratio of volumes works right, it adds a dimension to it. And so this kind of this whole no plugin can just spit out that sound that I created on this album, and no plugin can spit out the sound of a cool band playing. And I actually did a musical production. I'm recording a musical production, and we were doing demos yesterday, and then it was about tuning the singer, and I'm looking at the performance of the singer on Melodyne, and he's constantly below the pitch, and it sounds fantastic. So there's something in there. There's some storytelling is in the slightly out of tune.
That's cool to hear. I certainly hear a lot of that sort of thing, probably mostly in older records, where there's something that's just nothing more than a little mistake that happened, but it sounds nice blended together with everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's fun when you hear an explanation of what happened, because I will think sometimes like, wow, that was so weirdly intentional. I don't even know how they did that. Well, it turns out it was a mistake. And common, that last one's common, on drums, I guess. But yeah, it's a lovely aspect of it, like you said, the humanity of music.
Yeah, and I think it's also a foreground and background thing. So one thing is where I would totally contradict what I'm saying now is when I do hip hop and you have these big low sub basses or 808s, and I've developed a way of, when I do a production, where I tune them 3 times, and because they're so essential, and when they're in tune, that like just it almost sounds then like you're a much better mixing engineer just for getting that in tune. And it's not as easy as it sounds. Having said that, then you have a pad behind the singer fairly quietly in the background. And if that is 100% in tune, the song might be lame and the rules change. So it's this kind of like I don't know, the three main elements kind of have there's certain rules to that, and there's certain rules or certain things work for vocals. And then you have this whole idea of little backgrounds and reverbs, and a lot of reverbs that sound great are slightly out of tune or have artifacts. Like I for this album, for example, I use a lot of things that degrade the sound.
This episode of The Unstarving Musician is sponsored by Magic Mind. I struggle to keep my energy level steady, especially in the afternoon. I love coffee, but try not to drink it after 10:30 in the morning. Consistently creating new podcast episodes, subscriber emails, videos, and new music requires a lot of focus. Thank goodness I found Magic Mind. I've decided it's the perfect afternoon fix for my energy focus needs. Magic Mind has a short list of high-quality ingredients that will intrigue and likely benefit you. I think matcha may be the difference for me. Matcha is basically nature's extended release version of caffeine, and I really like the taste of Magic Mind. I felt good after taking it, and I'm not even good at taking supplements. I encourage you to check it out, especially if you struggle to stay focused on some days. Starting in January, you will find it in Sprouts Farmers Market stores across the country. If you have a Sprouts store nearby, get down there and grab a few bottles to try. After you're hooked, you can get a subscription with up to 50% off with my discount code. Just visit magicmind.com/TUM, like the unstarving musician, and use discount code TUM20. That's with the number 20. Again, visit magicmind.com/TUM. Use discount code TUM20 to get up to 50% off of Magic Mind. Let's talk about the videos, the short videos that you've made. So it looks, I'm not sure I've seen everything that you've done visually for it yet, but it looks to me from what I did see that it's a lot of shorts, and it looks like the whole collection lives on a disco.ac, like a playlist that you have, but there's also Instagram has a nice collection of them as well, a little smaller. Is that right? So
the disco playlist is a private thing. That's where it's basically for friends. So if somebody wants to post something themselves, you can download that. So that was just for you, so you can see them all together.
Got it.
But if you go to Boum Dans L'Espace or you find me on Instagram, you can find the connection. I have an Instagram account. In my own, there's a little button where you can look at all of them, but the album also has its own Instagram account. One thing about these little clips was that long time ago when I was living in London, I wrote a song about the London Underground that was very tongue-in-cheek, and I actually cast myself as the singer, and the joke was that I do have a German accent and that I'm not a rapper, I sound nerdy, but that kind of sold the story for me, and I thought that was fun, and I played it to a couple of people, and the reactions were like, okay, yeah, fair enough, clever lyrics. But I met a filmmaker, and she did a video for this, and we talked very, very much about storytelling and how to sell the story, how to frame the story. And with the video, the perception of the songs changed 100%, because what I did was different and weird, but on purpose. Until there was the video, there was a 50-50 where people were thinking like, is this meant to be like this? Just like, it's almost like the comedic aspect really hit home, or the weirdness really hit home once you had the images as well. And then when you listen to the song without the video, the song was kind of elevated in your mind. You know, it's if you listen to a song, it's 50% you, it's 50% of the song. So that's why in classical music, having a really good title or a really good story before makes a huge difference as well for your perception. And so the thing with these little videos is that A, they're fun and goofy, but B, it really says like, I really want to be in this world. This is really intended this is out of tune for a reason. And that's the point. And it's a nice little showcase, and you can share it with your friends, and you get a little sample of each of the songs.
Cool. Well, okay, yes, you tried to explain that to me in the email about using the the disco playlist for sharing. So now that I have that in mind, because I was like, man, I want to share some of these, and I thought, well, I'll get on my phone and put some of these Instagram posts to my stories. But they're really cool. They certainly add a different dimension or expand the dimension of each track. The ones that I've checked out so far, and I need just I want to sit with the whole album at least at chunks at a time because it's very interesting.
I thank you. I with the videos, the thought as well was also that all social media has become it's kind of like such a selfish place where you basically you open a door and you shout what you want from people in that room, and then you run away. And
True.
and so my idea was that I wanted to do something that I enjoy, because this is a project between lots and lots of projects where I work for other people, where I work for artists, where I always, respecting what they want, what they need, where basically they're the first audience, and where at the end of the day, I follow somebody else's creative vision, or I help with somebody else's creative vision. So I wanted to do something, one, for myself, but I also did not want to add more social media where it seems like I'm stealing time from you, and where I'm just like, hey, please look at me. And so with these videos, you make people laugh, people enjoy them, and they're just, it's I guess what Quibi kind of said what it should be. You're waiting for the bus, and this is 20 seconds fun, kind of. That's it. And I also, I on Instagram, I don't put the listen here or anything on there anymore. Just enjoy the little 20 seconds of silliness. There's one video where I took stuff from a film, which I guess in the 50s or the 60s, with a mechanical vulture, and the vulture is
I saw that one. I love it.
Poorly done, and I was laughing so hard when I found that. And I cut it together, put the music under it, and then the heading is classy entertainment, and so it's almost like an anti-commercial for listening to the music. But that one was very popular.
Now, is this the one? Tell me if it's the one I'm thinking of, because I was watching it and going, oh wow, I wonder if this is the inspiration for Rodin, the monster movies, because it's like the bird's really gigantic, and there's like is there an airplane in it?
Yeah, there's an airplane.
That's so amazing. I was laughing too when I saw it a little bit. It was cool.
The other thing about the album is, when you said you like sitting with it a little longer, is that a couple of people I know who are in music or film themselves, who have a nicer setup or who have a good pair of headphones, they really enjoy the just like listening beginning to end, closing your eyes, and then you're doing, like, it's a journey. There's plenty of room for you to, I don't know, to think about other stuff, but it still puts you in a mood which is like space exploration in the past. And I have a couple of friends who work on shows who are animators, and I'm very happy to hear that they love animating to it. So they just sit there, listen to the album, and draw to it, and that's wonderful.
That's cool. It would be. I could see it actually fitting into animation sound for animation too. So. Yeah, kudos.
Yeah, there's a huge sci-fi film coming out where I was already close with 3 of the tracks. So it's very cinematic, and that's also where I see some of these tracks going. I wouldn't be surprised if they would be in maybe an animation show or a film or something. And I have I kind of one thing that there's a filmmaker who asked me for 3 tracks for his documentary, and this is still an ongoing conversation. And this is a documentary centered around an area in crisis at the moment. So this is like on this planet, heartfelt, intense stuff, and he thinks the music goes 100% to illustrate his point. So that made me very happy, because like outside of the genre goofiness, there's heart and drama that he responded to.
That's so interesting. So something big happened, well, many things, but since we last spoke, and I was reminded of it when we were talking about the human aspects, the out of tune aspects, the mistakes in music. but AI and has happened big since since we last spoke. And I'm just curious what your observations have been and what your expectations are with regards to AI and music.
Um, my just randomly, my father, I'm from a university town in Germany. My father is friends with a kind of in Germany very well-known neurologist, and I had a chance to talk to him for 3 hours this summer. And before I met him, every time somebody talked to me about I would say there's no such thing as AI. Please call it machine learning. That indicates you understand what you're talking about. So I've been that person for a long time. So at some point, I'm like, okay, this is like, I just sound like a dick. I should stop doing this. So I meet this guy and I say AI, and he looks at me and he says, there's no such thing as AI. Please call it machine
Yeah,
learning.
sure.
And I'm like, oh no. I walked right into that one. But I think that there are machine learning tools which are incredibly useful, and I'm using a plugin to extract voices and to clean up voices, and what that plugin can do on that level without messing up the sound is amazing, and it's a heaven sent, and we will be able to restore bad recordings. Or I have this when with this music production I'm working on, sometimes people like background vocals, or somebody just has one line and they send that recorded somewhere else and it's less than ideal. And so having that tool to clean up the vocal as a non-creative, as a technical tool is fantastic. So I'm not against using machine learning technology. What bothers me a lot is that it seems politically it's kind of almost used to make people feel bad about themselves and superfluous. And on a creative level, it's just nonsense. Like AI or machine learning cannot write a script, it cannot write a song or any of this. And I think it's important to understand that this is just a collage generator with a lot of data, and the data is stolen. There was a funny meme where somebody said, like, my favorite new technology is the copyright infringement algorithm. And so I think we should have some respect to ourselves, and for the creativity, and a soul comes from a human perspective, and from basically not saying this is the average of all authors' decision at this moment, but to say, hey, I'm writing this, or we are having this conversation in 2023. What we had for breakfast influences that, the weather influences, that's how we feel influences this. And so I think that the soul and the value of art is a translation. Somebody looks at the world for a long time and translates that into something that is very meaningful, because it is exclusive, and because it is personal, and because it is not a compromise or a collage of a lot of things, but it's actually more about the filter than the world. And so I'm on the one side 100%, yeah, give me the machine learning tools to make my productions like help with technical issues or something like this. I have no motivation to use a prompt-based tool, because the thought that somebody else types the same thing as me and gets the same result is the opposite of craftsmanship and art for me.
Yeah, it's interesting, speaking at like the most basic level of using it on a prompt basis. I was using it for a while and have kind of stopped. Not, it just sort of happened. I didn't do it intentionally, but I was using it to help prompt me to get something going, like outline something for me, or
Yeah.
give me a list of this and let me think about that. And at first it was like, write me a summary of blah, blah, blah. And then I would kind of expand on that. And of course I got caught up initially in trying to use it in ways that just did not work out at all. Because it gave me garbage, and I didn't realize it was giving me garbage until I did. But I guess what I found was, or what I was reminded of, is that I think a lot more when I just kind of start from from scratch. It allows me to think, and what I mean by that, it just allows me to think through something and sort of process the way I look at something. Whereas if I'm using it, to prompt me for everything or to try and give me content, and it does bother me too, like you said, sort of the opposite of creativity. If people are, and we know what's happening. People are putting out, for instance, written content that they hardly did anything massaged at all. They just had it
Yeah.
prompted out, and it's kind of sad.
The neurologist that I talked to said that he's in his 70s. He said like he's been studying the brain for almost 50 years. And he said it's very simple to understand. The brain always goes the path of the least resistance, and it's all about energy saving because the brain is quite energy consuming. And so he says that by that default, there's plenty of advantages, but one of the downside of that is that anything convenient and can enslave you, can make you stupid, can make you basically downgrade yourself. And he basically, he said like, okay, so if you don't drive through the city anymore remembering the road, but you use the navigation system, you have just outsourced one thing from your brain. So that means you save 1% of energy on that trip, but you also lack 1% training on that trip. And so he basically said like, from a human development, political, for all kinds of reasons, you should claim some things back from your mobile phone. And I like this idea, and I like the idea of like there's plenty of stuff that is hard to do, but the value is that it's hard to do and that it's a little easier the next time, and you install that skill inside, like it's basically you install the app in your own brain and you don't need anybody else. And there is a value to that outside of course, there's the perspective thing. And I have basically one New Year's resolution for the next year with myself, where I'm catching myself that I don't play enough. Because when I score a commercial, I have a very tight deadline and I play garbage on the piano and then clean up the MIDI and move on. And so basically I am deteriorating as a performer. And so my kind of resolution for next year is to stop doing that and take the minute to practice it properly, to learn it. And when I am not on a project, to just actually play with my hands and not fix it with a mouse. And I think generally, like the more skills you have without using any help, the better it is.
Cool. Well, I hope you're going to schedule that into your days so it happens.
Oh, this is going to be such a disaster. I can already see it.
I really love that though. I'm constantly like I had a guy visit from the States who I had an opportunity to perform at a local festival with, and I always have this thing where I feel like, dang it, I'm not playing enough. So, I'll walk onto a stage like I did at the festival, and I just felt kind of tight and it didn't feel good. I listened to it afterwards and it was fine, but it's like, didn't feel good. And I know it was a product of just not playing enough and practicing enough, but it's a wonderful inspiration and reminder to myself to hear you say that.
Yeah. And I mean, my job is not the job. My main job is writing and producing. So my main skills lie elsewhere, and that's okay. But it's a matter of a little personal pride as well, or professional pride. And I with the last with the pandemic and less sessions in person, I had less writing sessions. And then when I started to have writing sessions again, it was mainly with rappers. And so it was more where I would pre-produce something and then we would work on the vocal performance together. But it's also a matter of, I want to work again with more artists that play their instruments. And if you are in a 3-hour writing session with a guitar, the better your fingers are in shape, the better you can get your point across. And that's something that's important to me.
Yeah, I get it. Well, speaking of working with others, last time we spoke, one of the big topics I think we covered was artist development. How is that part of your world today? Are you still heavily into it? Do you have things on the horizon for it? Has it never stopped?
So last year I worked a lot with a rapper called True Def, who was a great guy, and we did a number of tracks, just the two of us, just basically working on. Because I noticed that because I work in sync and commercials, I noticed that when I work with artists and I follow their stories, very often their personal stories, and I wanted something that is kind of like fast, energetic, and so I kind of like I met a couple of artists, talked to a couple of people, but he was just killer and fantastic energy in real life. And we did 3 tracks, like high energy hip hop tracks together. And one of them ended up in a Toyota commercial. It was really, really nice. And
I
then
saw
we
a clip of
had,
that, by the way.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
nice.
yeah. And he's a great rapper. And then we had somebody at Warner heard this track, and then we did an EP for them with a rapper, the two of us. And so I'm still heavily involved. I did a couple of scores that took more focus than in the second half, but I've basically I penciled in working with more artists for myself in January, and yeah,
Nice.
wrapping up a couple of things, and then January and February I'll be in LA, and it will be about working with artists.
Cool. Well, keep me posted on the work that you're doing with them. Have you? Do you still stay in touch with Amiena?
Yes, on and off. I mean, there's still a number of tracks that are not out, and I don't fully know what her plans are for that, but there are a number of really wonderful tracks which are unreleased. So at some point, I assume they will be released, but that's her album, so it's her call when and how.
Sure. Well, hopefully soon. She's talented.
Yeah, great voice, and some very wonderful tracks in there. And as you are in Mexico, in March or April in Mexico City, there will be a new tourist attraction, which is a flying theater where you get strapped in. It's a like IMAX size screen, and you fly, flying across Mexico, and it's stunning images. They spend a lot of time to get these images, wonderful helicopter and a couple of drone shots, and it's one continuous flight, and Mexico is very beautiful, and it has my score. So you get to experience Mexico with a German scoring Mexico.
Cool. What is the name of the project or the?
It's
the
a Flying Theater Mexico City. So it should be opening in March or April.
Okay, cool.
In Mexico City.
Oh, nice.
So it's a flying theater.
That'd be great. That sounds
like
cool.
Soaring over the world at Disneyland, something like that.
Nice. I'll check that out. Okay, so I want to wrap up with a couple of left field questions, and one of them is just for me, but I happen to notice the lingo on I think your latest release.
Yeah.
Can you please explain to me Dolby Atmos?
Oh yeah. So basically, it is surround on steroids. You have 7 speakers around you, but you also have 4 speakers above you in the ceiling. Mm-hmm. And it's a standard. It's like 5.1, 7.1. It's a standard, but it is slightly different approach where you can pinpoint an object somewhere in the room very precisely. By the time this interview is out, there will be a release of this album with a big 3D sticker on it, which will be this album in Atmos. And if you have either an Atmos setup or a soundbar that is Atmos enabled, or you have Apple Music, then you can hear that in a more 3D version. Ideal scenario is, of course, you're in a room. There are not that many rooms, and it's a weird format because it's fantastic in the room, but there's not that many rooms. It's cinemas. Some cars are equipped with it. But it is basically a very 3D surround format. What Apple Music does is it makes this format available also on headphones. It's not the same to listen on headphones because it's nicer if all of these objects are flying around in an actual 3D world. but there is going to be an immersive mix. So if you are on Apple Music, by the time this podcast comes out, you can listen to the stereo version, which is more in your face and a little louder and brighter. And you can listen to the Atmos or immersive version, which is more enveloping and a little rounder and warmer. And if you have some kind of setup at home, be it a surround setup or a Atmos-enabled soundbar or something, you can have all these synthesizers and sounds fly around you, and it's a very cool experience.
Cool. Well, I'm going to check it out on Apple Music then, and I'm going to be investing in some home entertainment in the coming
14
year
speakers.
for a new home. So I'm just going to get an Atmos-enabled soundbar. That's it. I'm not.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the that is so weird with this format is that if you are in an actual room, like in a studio, and so like there's a lot of engineers are very excited about this, and it's a great format to work in because in the room you have so much bandwidth and so much space, and like when like there's two songs on the album, Nicola in Space and Solo Finale in Space, they're both so cool in Atmos because you have these little generator buzzing left and then right, and then things move from here to there, and the theremin flies over your head. And so you're sitting in that room and you think this is the coolest thing ever. And then you leave the space and you're kind of a little bit depressed because it's going to be 8 people to hear this like this. And that's the kind of the gold standard. Having said that, with a soundbar like yours, what the soundbar, or what you might buy, does, it is throws away these sounds in a room, trying to emulate that with reflections. So it can work really well, and it can be really interesting. It's not 100% the same. So with the immersive on Apple, I think that for this particular music, because it is so spatial and you can zone out to it, it's kind of interesting and it works. But I know a lot of people that switch off the immersive for rap and rock projects straight away because they don't like that it's less punchy. But for this particular project, I think it works really well.
I guess that's why they've hasn't Apple Music done this heavily in classical? Is that right?
Yeah, they do it everywhere, and a lot of people, and also a lot of people who mix a lot of this stuff, are a little torn about it because in a theoretical world, this is a great format and it's interesting, and I love mixing it, and I hope to have more bands and other albums to listen to that. And I know a guy who mixes bluegrass in Atmos, and when you are in his room and you listen to that, it's wonderful. It's like the band is around you.
Yeah.
And so that's all cool. The problem is, how does that translate for an actual listener in the real world? And that's where it gets a little tricky.
I'm thinking two things. Jimi Hendrix, would have maybe liked this, and then the other one I was thinking of is, so it's basically quadraphonic. I'm just kidding.
It's kind of, it's hyper quadraphonic. I think there is so I'm my good friend Irko, who has mixed Kanye's Donda, and who has an Atmos room in his studio, and he's Italian, and on his birthday he always serves great pizza. He said, if you eat a pizza, you want the cheese on the tomato on the dough. You don't want the cheese all the way on the left corner on this table in here. That's what he said to me, and I think there is a point to it. And stereo, because of the limited space and because of all kinds of other things, it's punchy, it's in your face, and it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's going to be the format, and stereo is going to stay the format. Having said that, the space that you have with Atmos, and if you're lucky that for whatever reason you have a setup where the 3D stuff comes out more, it can be very, very interesting. And with classical music, it can be great because you can emulate a space. Like, rather than having with stereo, you can have 3D, but the 3D is always behind the stage. Like, the stage is, as it's basically like looking at a TV. There's only depth of field in one direction. And that works really great. But for Atmos, for certain things, you can have things float around behind you and in front of you, and it can be cool.
Sure, yeah, I've heard early applications of that concept. So it just sounds like Atmos is a very refined version of. Okay, last question.
Yeah,
and I hope this. You may have to take a step back from the conversation to just sort of think about it as simple as it sounds. But what are you thinking about these days?
Okay. Like generally
Sure.
or musically?
Take your pick.
This may sound super, I don't know. I'm currently very grateful in so many different ways that I just get to live and do this, and I'm surrounded by so many wonderful, creative, interesting people. And so one of the things that I'm doing at the moment that is thinking a lot less, and that makes me a lot happier. And I don't know, maybe it's a matter of age or something, but I have so many people that realize at some point that, okay, you don't need to be as firm with this artist. You don't need to try to grasp this so hard. You don't need to try to control this. And so I'm kind of in the biohacking, or a cool word for it would be kind of flow state a lot now. And so this is kind of like, usually in the past, I would try to plan out a million things for the next year. And now I'm just not thinking and just being here, and I'm enjoying that a lot, and helps the music, helps the well-being, helps everything.
That's beautiful. I like it. It's good talking with you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. I'm glad you emailed me, and keep me in the loop on the projects that are coming up.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
This episode was powered by Podcast Startup. If you feel you need a little help with that podcast you've been contemplating, Podcast Startup may be just the thing for you. Podcast Startup was designed for new podcasters. Did you know that most podcasts don't make it past their first few episodes? That's right. They start, they stall, and then they die. Sustaining a podcast ain't easy. Lack of planning and misaligned expectations are a recipe for fast podcast fade out. If you want to start a podcast the right way, go to unstarvingmusician.com/podcast startup to receive free podcast startup tips from yours truly, and to learn more about podcast startup. If you do not yet have a website for your music, check out Bandzoogle. It was created to help musicians and bands build their website and manage direct-to-fan marketing and sales. Bandzoogle has amazing design options, a commission-free store to sell music, merch, tickets, and more, plus tools that can capture detailed fan data for you. Try it free at bandzoogle.com. Use the promo code ROBONZO, ROBONZO, to get 15% off your first year. Thank you for listening. You can leave us feedback, questions, comments, complaints at unstarvingmusician.com/feedback. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. If you love this podcast, please visit unstarvingmusician.com/crowdsponsor to learn about the many ways of showing your love and support. Your support does indeed equal love. The series music you heard in this episode is New Gods Part 2 by yours truly. Find links for all the places to hear the full version with vocals by yours truly at robonzo.com. Find links for all the people and things talked about in this episode at unstarvingmusician.com. Peace, love, and a whole lot of gratitude.